As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, Soda Nation? Welcome back to the show. Before we dive into this full-fledged, we want to kind of break down what's going to happen later on in this episode. Just take a few minutes to kind of set the table for what's shaping up to be, I believe, one of the most telling Saturdays of the Brent Venables era. And you got to start with kind of the gut punch, what everyone's talking about on this Tuesday before the Auburn game. That's the confirmation that senior center Troy Everett, captain, fifth-year lineman. A lot of people describe him this way as the heartbeat of that offensive front for the Sooners. He's out for the season, out with a knee injury, same injury, just the other knee. And last year it cost him half of the season. This year it robs him of not just the Temple game last week, not just the SEC opener on Saturday, but the rest of this season. And this was a guy who spent the entire offseason rehabbing, lifting and telling anyone who asked, my knee's feeling great. And it was. It's just now the other one is messed up. He Everett was supposed to be the steadying hand, if you will, that guy who makes the line calls, setting the protections up there for the quarterback, for the running game, the veteran that everyone else could lean on. And just like that, for the rest of the season, he's gone, not just from the huddle, but he's gone from those battles in the trenches. But here's the thing. Oklahoma may already have baked a lot of leadership into the DNA of this line. Jake Maikkula steps in center last week. His early starts, the way he's played this year, it's been good. It's been solid. His pass protection grade strong. His awareness is high. The rest of this unit's young, but it's also cross-trained, meaning that they go multiple positions on that line. And Everett and this staff, they spent the summer kind of drilling fundamentals, doing film study, position flexibility. And Troy Everett was very much a part of all of that with these younger guys. And you saw some of the dividends last week in Philly with 200-plus rushing yards. And they've run the ball, if you count Mateer as part of the running game, because the offensive line does pave the way on his designed run plays. They've run for 200-plus yards in 2 of the first 3 games. John Mateer has only been sacked 3 times all season long. And then you had those 4 straight scoring drives to open up against Temple. So, yeah, scheme matters. The opponent absolutely matters. But playing assignment sound football, that doesn't happen by accident. And now here comes Auburn, right? Not just another game, not just another SEC opponent, but this is the season opener in terms of conference play, and it's at home. A physical team with a quarterback that Sooner fans we know all too well. Jackson Arnold, once the face of Oklahoma's future, he returns, but he's going to be wearing orange and blue. The Tigers 3-0. He's 3-0 as the starter there. Seems to be, through the first 3 games of the season, kind of cleaner in his decision-making. No interceptions, but when you talk about Jackson Arnold coming back to Norman, the storylines pretty much write themselves here. And Brent tried to deflect it. This is Oklahoma versus Auburn. And Hugh Freeze has kind of done the same with Arnold, but the reality is this matchup is going to test Oklahoma's depth and their culture up front. Without Everett the center of that rotation. Maikkula, you got the underclassmen behind him. You got some converted guards. This will be trial under fire against a quarterback who needs to prove, even though everyone's downplaying it, they needs to prove that he was the man, and Oklahoma let him go. Oklahoma didn't see what they had in him. And I think on both sides, I think you got the crowd noise factor that's going to help Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold, but pre-snap reads, man, that's going to be key on both sides of the offensive lines. Both defenses are going to use blitzes, they're going to use stunts. And I think if you're Auburn, one of the ways that you attack this is you try to expose communication breakdowns. Now remember, R. Mason Thomas, he's out for the first half of this game. Whether you believe that it was a bogus call or it was a legit call on targeting last week, he's out. It doesn't matter what you believe anymore because the decision's been upheld. And this is exactly the kind of situation where leadership, it's got to come from everywhere, not just the captains. So what's Oklahoma going to need to do to minimize the damage? I think we're going to get well into this, but up front, let me just tell you, Oklahoma needs to start fast. I think you need from John Mateer some quick rhythm type throws. You need tempo. You remember how fast they went against Temple last week? And you've got to run the ball efficiently. Let John Mateer kind of distribute the ball and let this line settle in. Eliminate mental errors. No false starts. You don't botch the snaps. Those are how games kind of make momentum swings. And when it does come time to rotate, man, rotate those guys and keep them fresh. Not just the running backs and tight ends. They all help with pass protection, but rotate those guards if you need to. And then finish strong. I believe the second half is probably where Oklahoma is going to start getting an edge in this game. That's where fatigue is going to start to show. That's where Everett's voice from the sideline and the halftime adjustments, they can all still matter, right? Even if in a tight game. But there's a bigger picture, and that's Brent Venables. He's been preaching the standards, the toughness, the resilience since day one for 4 years now, going into the fourth season of this. And Saturday is just going to be the next test of whether those things, whether they live only in the slogans that they put on the wall, the things they say in radio and TV interviews, or is that really the way that this team plays when this captain is over there on street clothes? You got a former 5-star quarterback on the other sideline who just desperately wants to beat you, not just to protect his team's undefeated record, but to make a statement. And Oklahoma holding up in the trenches, playing clean, avoiding self-inflicted wounds, that's what's going to protect their perfect record. That's how they're going to announce to the SEC that this is a program built on depth and culture and not just star power. So that's pretty much the frame for today's episode. We're gonna break down Auburn's tendencies and things that they do. We're going to talk about some matchups. We'll get into all of this, not just today, but this week. But as you're listening, just keep in mind that this Saturday, it's not about Everett's injury or Arnold's return. It's about who Oklahoma is becoming. And if the Sooners come out of this game with poise, toughness, and discipline, Everett's loss won't be something that defines them. It's probably something that's going to make them stronger. So this is going to be a big one. Let's dive in. Let's enjoy this episode. This is the Sooner Nation Podcast.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
All right, so let's go more in detail with Troy Everett, because I think it really was a gut punch. I think it was that when you knew that he didn't make the trip to Philadelphia, there was fear, there was concerns, and you hate it for him as a person, right? Obviously you hate it for the team because of what he meant, but you really hate it for the person of Troy Everett, because this is a guy who has done all the right things since arriving on campus. And now being that fifth-year senior, that team captain, that emotional leader, I mean, it carries kind of heavy. You know, last week it was, Troy Everett's injured, and now it's Troy Everett's gone. And it's one of those things where it affects and it changes. Like, you know that as your offensive line, you know your captain's injured, right? So you go into this game, you want to hold the gap, so to speak. Now you go into the game knowing he's gone. And man, you hate it. I don't care what the team. I don't. You pick your arch nemesis, right? Let's go with the Texas Longhorns. You just never want to see these young men have the type of injury that sideline. I don't want to see anybody injured ever, but especially the type of injury that just almost kind of derails dreams, because it's the exact same injury that he sustained in 2024. It's just to the opposite knee. And if you remember right, he missed half of that season. And man, he was so excited to come into this 2025 season healthy. He talked about how his knee was feeling great. He talked about how he was finally getting a full off season to rehab, to get stronger. And for Oklahoma, all that meant was, they believed, this coaching staff, Bill Bedenbaugh, Ben Arbuckle, all those offensive guys, they believed that they had their centerpiece up front. They had someone who could stabilize every snap, make the line calls, to set the protections. And because he was a fifth-year guy, you kind of had the kind of veteran presence that younger guys could lean on. Now that's gone in terms of game snaps. But the question becomes, how much has Everett's impact already been built into this offensive line? And can Oklahoma keep moving forward, especially knowing that the bigger tests are still ahead of you? Because as tough as this loss is, there's a reason I think Oklahoma can still have confidence up front. I mean, this isn't 2024, and I know there's some PTSD going around. But this offensive line without Troy Everett, it's not just suddenly an offensive line without hope. Maikkula, I mean, he stepped in last week. And what we've seen from him this season, I mean, it's been solid. Strong passing grades, good awareness, able to, just to take care of so many different protections that Everett would have called out. And the rest of the line, it looks young, but the coaching staff and Everett himself, they put in the work this offseason. Everett was there helping these guys with fundamentals, helping them in film sessions. And again, those cross-training positions where you play multiple positions along the line. And they were preparing for a moment just like this. And what we saw against Temple last Saturday, it already illustrates that much of the blueprint laid by Troy Everett is still holding. Again, we talked about it in that opening segment, 200 yards on the ground. 200 yards on the ground in 2 of the first 3 games this season. John Mateer's been relatively clean. They're averaging 1 sack per game. And again, you look at those first 4 drives. Without Troy Everett, those first 4 drives last Saturday, they all ended in scores. And right, like we said, some of that is scheme. Some of that is an opponent mismatch. But a lot of it is the offensive line playing assignment sound, cohesive football. And I think those are the type of things that Troy Everett helped drill into these guys. And now where it really matters the most is SEC conference play. Auburn, that's the next game. That's the next thing on the slate. And we know it's not just another game. We know it's not just the SEC opener. This is going to be a test of depth for Oklahoma because I think they're not hopeless without Troy Everett, but they are thinner. And Auburn is going to be physical. And they're gonna have defensive linemen. They're gonna have linebackers who want to hit and play physical. And without Troy Everett there in the middle for at least, for the season, right? Maikkula takes up. Maikkula. I'm just going to take me a minute on that name, right? He's going to be the man under pressure. Because like I said, that mindset is different. The mindset is different. I'm filling in this week against Temple I'm the new starting guy, and now we're going into conference play. And everything's going to have to be clean. Everything's going to have to be, crisp. You're going to have good communication. And this offensive line is going to have to do what we've seen them do through the first 3 games of the season without excuse. They have to be more physical than their opponent at the point of attack. And they have to limit their mistakes. The pre-snap reads, they still have to be there. You can't say we don't have it because we don't have Troy Everett. Picking up blitzes, recognizing the stunts, all of that, if it's not taken care of, it exposes you. And it exposes the big, absence on your line. And Brent Venables, he's not a guy to sugarcoat things. And he said it. Troy Everett, he's going to have to lead in a different type of way. And like everybody else, Brent Venables mentioned, I'm just really hurt for him. I mean, you hate this story. But that leadership from the sideline, from the field room, from being the guy younger linemen look to, those aren't like just check spot, stats, things you check on a box. They pay off. And in games like what's happening on Saturday, they could be what separates good offensive lines from great ones. But I got to bring this up at least one more time, the emotional side. Because there's going to be like this heaviness, if you will, in the locker room. But also with that heaviness comes opportunity. Maikkula is a good example of that. A chance for guys to step up. A chance for guys to kind of own their own role within this offense that maybe they couldn't do it before. So what does Oklahoma have to do against Auburn to minimize the damage that Troy Everett's absence may cause? Well, I mentioned these in the opening segment, but let's go into them a little deeper. They've got to get into a quick rhythm, and they've got to do that early. Getting the offense flowing early, it reduces the pressure on that position, on the position that's center right there in the middle. And if Maikkula can distribute the ball quickly, if he can use tempo, and if they can run the ball efficiently from the get-go, then it allows those guys up front opportunities to have that time to settle in. But to do that, you have to eliminate mental errors. You can't shoot yourself in the foot. Things like false starts, miscommunications, mistakes. Those are the type of things that they snowball. They just turn they turn a 2nd and 5 into a 2nd and 10, or if you get a holding call, a 2nd and 15. And then those are the things that Auburn's they're going to capitalize on those. They're going to look for those type of mistakes. And this is a defense that leads the SEC in quarterback sacks. So I do believe that Oklahoma is going to need depth. I think that they're going to need to rotate guys. But suddenly you may not be able to do that at the center position like you could be at the guards and the tackles. But, these coaches, they've talked about the depth at the line. And I think Saturday is going to give us our first true life test of it. Because I don't think this is a better defensive line than what Oklahoma faced in Michigan. But now you're facing it without one of your key guys. And then I think that, the second half push, I think that's when really you're going to feel the absence more than anything else, because that second half, man, the game gets physical, fatigue sets in, and Oklahoma, they've got to be the ones that kind of lean. What you want to do is you want to lean on this defensive line. And that's, can they continue to do that without having one more body to rotate in there? But so I think those are the things you're going to look at immediately in the light of Everett's absence. But there's one more thing. There's like a philosophical side of this, because I think this injury does create the opportunity to see if Oklahoma's culture, what they've been preaching, that resilience, that toughness, these standards that we've heard about, is it more than talk? Because Venables, it looks like, what we hear, what we see so far is that he's built on this through practice, through the off-season workouts, through leadership beyond just taking snaps. And the idea is that even when someone goes down, this identity of who we are, it still holds up. Now, we didn't see that last year. This is our first chance to see it this year. And if it's there, if it does hold up, then that's going to tell us more about where this team and where this program is than anything that the scoreboard is going to say. And, for Everett, it's more than just a physical setback. I think for him, it's a moment like what Brent said, that it shifts how he leads. Because I think he's done everything he could to help build the attitude along this offensive line, to be the captain, that guy in the film room and that guy on the field. But now he's going to be the guy in street clothes. And he's still going to have to find a way to have an impact. And I think he will. I think he's going to be there, right there, in the middle of that huddle, coaching guys up on the sideline. And that's leadership. That's a quieter leadership, but it's leadership. And that could be, if you will, the glue that kind of keeps the line from spiraling when Auburn dials up their pressure. So what's my take here heading into Saturday? We'll get in throughout the week more about score predictions and that kind of stuff, but I do believe Oklahoma wins this game. I think they have enough firepower. I think they have enough defensive strength. I think there's enough institutional advantage in Norman, if you will. But I think this is going to be one of those wins that shows whether the team is truly built to withstand adversity or whether we need to have concerns. So the margin may not be like a blowout early, because the line may feel the absence of one of its most trusted voices. But if they play up to that standard that we believe they can, if everybody else does their part and they minimize the mistakes, then I think not only does Oklahoma protect its undefeated mark, but I think it sends this message out to the rest of the conference that this is a team with depth. This is a team with culture, not just a bunch of guys with some star power beside their names. And so from that standpoint, that this is more than just a game for Oklahoma on Saturday. It is very much a test. It's a moment to see how much of what they've built goes beyond just one guy. And if Oklahoma comes out of it, again, playing with that poise, that toughness, that discipline, then, Everett's loss is not going to define anything about this season. It's going to be tragic because you hate to see the guy go down, but it's something that they can rally around maybe and even make him stronger. So there we go. Get ready for the test. You pack your patience with you on Saturday. Expect some physicality, but watch the subtle things. Watch the pre-snap reads. Watch those calls. Watch the rotations that come in and out. And I think that's where we're going to see more of the definition of who this team is on Saturday against Auburn.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
So before we talk more about Oklahoma, Auburn, let's go back to Philadelphia and talk about Saturday. Let's just talk about what Oklahoma showed. Because I think that's going to lead into what we want to talk about more with the Auburn game on Saturday. Because, we look at what they did. We look at what still maybe needs to be worked on a little bit. And what Brent Venables says off the field. Because those things matter as well. I mean, when you listen to Coach speak, and I think this staff does a good job at kind of telling you what's what. They don't make it hard to read between the lines, is what I'm saying. And sometimes when you look at that game, that trip to Philadelphia, sometimes you walk into a game thinking that maybe your team will just get by, right? Maybe they'll coast just enough. Especially in a situation like that where it's sandwiched between two bigger games. So you had Michigan night game, top 25 matchup. You've got Auburn primetime afternoon kickoff, that 2:30 slot. Oh yeah, in between them is a trip to Philadelphia. But Oklahoma, I mean, they didn't lose sight of anything while they were up in Philly. That was a business trip from start to finish. And playing on Brent Venables' post-game words, the Sooners turned Lincoln Financial Field into their own little playground. And again, the win over Michigan felt substantial. It was a defining moment, not just for the season, but for the program. But then you look back on what happened Saturday in Philadelphia, how they followed that up. And Oklahoma piled on. They piled on with balance, speed, and precision. They scored on their first 4 possessions. They had the crazy 2-point conversion that we've talked about in excess. 25-0 first half lead. They didn't blink. And Javonte Barnes opened up the scoring. Torrey Blaylock broke out for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. John Mateer, 282 yards and added 51-yard running touchdown late in the game. And defensively, man, this defense continues to shine. They held Temple to just 104 total yards. That's not 104 rushing yards. That's not 104 passing yards. 104 total yards. That's the fewest that Oklahoma's allowed in more than a decade. Temple was 3 for 16 on third down and 12 punts. That's more than 2 decades. I think it was 2000 the last time Oklahoma forced an opponent to punt 12 times. And so what stood out the most wasn't just blowing out an outmatched team. I mean, Temple was definitely overmatched. But it was winning the way good teams win. You had offensive variety. You had tempo. You had defensive discipline. There was depth that was on display throughout the game. And that's the kind of performance that doesn't just win one week. It builds belief. And all that said, the scoreboard is only half the story. And Brent Venables knows that. And after the game, he praised certain aspects of the team that maybe the casual observer might have just kind of glossed over it. But he did. He pointed out the defensive ability to kind of bend without breaking, the way Oklahoma kept field position, winning that battle, how they responded after, the turnover. The defense answered that call. They knocked Temple backwards. They forced a field goal rather than giving up a touchdown. And Venables emphasized that this group, they're hungry, they're driven, they're humble, they're tough, and there is a high standard that they play by. And that they like to be challenged. But I love it. I mean, he said when they play together, these are his words, it kind of resembles recess. They have fun. And obviously that line, it stuck with me because fun and a standard to which you live by and conduct yourself by, they don't have to be contradictions if you build the culture in the right way. And when a team enjoys competition, but they do the little things, the assignments, the technique, the conditioning, that's when you start getting repeated dominant performances. And depth, which we spent a lot of time talking about here on this episode, depth is another thing that Venables highlighted. He's not shy about the fact that Temple was perhaps, a breather for Oklahoma, but also that OU used the opportunity to test its backups and use those guys in rotation, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that's why he said after the game, there was good depth at all three levels. But again, remember I said he doesn't make coach speak hard. You don't have to work to read between the lines, because he was clear. He said maybe it's not a solid 3 deep, but maybe it's like 1.5, a solid 2. So that matters for 2 reasons, right? Because the schedule is just going to get tougher. And when starters need to be rested, when injuries happen, they always do, guys know where they stand. Guys know what needs to be done so they can step up and get more time on the field. Now, obviously things weren't perfect in Philadelphia on Saturday. There were signs that things still need to be cleaned up. Keontae Lewis getting injured. This is a guy that the offense needs. And Brent talked earlier this week that they think he's going to be back. He took that shot and he did walk off under his own power, which is a good sign. But there's the depth of the situation again, right? Our Mason Thomas getting ejected. That was a third quarter ejection, so that means it's going to cost him and it's going to cost this defense one of their best pass rush weapons for the first half against Auburn. So there we go. Depth is going to be tested. And I brought this up on Sunday, our post-game podcast. I think 3 games in, you have to start talking about the concern that Oklahoma has on turnovers. I know we're kind of excited about Jackson Arnold coming and his propensity to turn the ball over and maybe in that defensive drought. But Oklahoma has turned the ball over every game this season. And the defense has nada, none, 0, zilch. No forced turnovers for the defense. Not one interception, not one forced fumble. And Brent was, he was blunt. How disgusting is that, is what he said. And he mentioned that they start every practice with turnover circuit. But we got to do a better job. Those are his words. Because that's going to be a really important part as we jump into SEC play here next week. So even though Temple, they posed a minimal threat, the opportunity for turnovers was there. And now that you're taking this step up in competition, you got to take advantage of those opportunities. Because turnovers, that's what flips the script of a game. And Oklahoma's going to have to start getting them. They have to. So when you look forward to Auburn at home you realize it's going to be a different challenge. Not just that it's the second ranked opponent in 3 weeks, or not that it's just Oklahoma's SEC opener. Not because of Troy Everett being out, not because of Jackson Arnold coming back, but because when you look at the X's and O's, when you look at the guys lining up on the field, what you see is that Auburn brings a physical, opportunistic style of football. And yeah, there is the Jackson Arnold factor. You know, you got the former Sooner quarterback returning to Norman. There is that narrative, right? There's emotion, but again, Brent Venables was trying to get ahead of it. And what he doesn't want is for that to be the story. And he said this week, this is about Oklahoma versus Auburn. There will be I love how he said it. There will be an Auburn quarterback, and he's very talented. But this, for us, is to find a way to get a win in our opener here in the SEC. Read it between the lines, the subtext. You can't win this game if you let the storyline become the distraction. And when you go back to Temple, when you go back to what happened in Philadelphia, you see that Oklahoma's got those pieces in place to be a really good team. I mean, offensively, John Mateer this week, the Heisman odds just released. I mean, and again, I hate talking about Heisman in September, just like I hate talking about playoff favorites in September. But, I mean, he's the odds-on favorite right now. He took a big jump. He's showing that he can lead with both what he does with his arm and his legs. Blaylock is emerging. The depth chart is out. Blaylock is RB1 going into the Auburn game. What you're seeing from Jaren Kanak, it's paying off, converting him from linebacker to tight end, especially on third downs, especially when Oklahoma needs a chain mover. And I think that's going to bleed into the red zone. And even without R. Mason Thomas, I mean, in that first half, the defense has shown enough discipline and depth that I don't think there's a concern for collapse. I think you can still look at this matchup and say, yeah, they should control the line of scrimmage. Offensively, without Troy Everett, they should still be able to protect the quarterback. And we've seen through 12 quarters of football that they make it a point to avoid self-inflicted mistakes. And what they want to do across the board on both sides of the ball is they want to force Auburn into uncomfortable situations. And we've seen the propensity. We've seen the ability. We've seen the knack of doing that. And here's what I believe. I believe that we're seeing from this team, not just the coaching staff, not just the players, but the entire organization. I think we're seeing that they are no longer content just to win a football game. They want to own it. They want to own the moment. They don't really care about the scoreboard. You know, obviously they want to be on top, but they care about how they do it. They care about how they win. They would rather, they want discipline. They want to win with discipline. They want to have fun. They want proper execution, and they want to flash their depth. Those are the things that we're seeing through 3 weeks of football, and those are the words that Brent Venables keeps going back to because they matter. They don't just matter to him. Those are culture-defining words for this program. And you don't, in the SEC, you don't just beat teams, right? You've got to grind them down. And I think Oklahoma has proven enough that they can start getting talked up once again about these elite programs. And every step now, because the microscope, you're under it, moving forward, every step matters. Every step counts. We try really hard at the website not to be biased, but we are. But we try not to. But even in our own unbiased takes, we've got Oklahoma right now number 2 in the SEC power rankings over at Heartland Sports. Heartland-sports.com, by the way. There's my plug. But Oklahoma's proven. They're proving that they're worth the conversation. They're worth being in the conversation. And now you've got Auburn coming in. This is Tennessee last year. It's the first step in this conference slate, this gauntlet. And you need your offensive line to not have excuses. You need them to hold steady. You need your defensive line not to have excuses, especially in the first 2 quarters with R. Mason Thomas out. You need them to hold and control the line of scrimmage. You need to force turnovers. And when you get those things, it sets the tone for the following week. You know, I guess really the following week is Kent State, but you could say it sets the tone for getting ready for Texas, right? So it's important. These things matter. Thanks for hanging out with us here at the Sooner Nation podcast. Let's talk Jackson Arnold.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
So maybe Brent Venables and Hugh Freeze want to avoid this storyline. And I get it. I do. But you can't. I mean, we cannot let it go. We can't let it slide. And I say we, I'm talking about Sooner Nation. It's hard to avoid. It's impossible to avoid because it brings emotion, history, pressure, all in opportunity, all in one package, right? Because Jackson Arnold returning to Norman as Auburn's quarterback, it makes this more than just another opponent. There's an underlining tone here with this game that's about legacy, rivalry, and honestly making a statement. Jackson Arnold was supposed to be the future at Oklahoma. He came in with those expectations. He had that 5-star pedigree. But, you know, there were, I hate to say it, you know, but there were, going back to his first start in the Alamo Bowl against Arizona, it was rough. It was rough. And you're hard-pressed to find highlight moments. You got, you know, and it's fair to say it's not all on Jackson. He had injuries. There's offensive instability. But then he had the turnovers. He had that problem. And the bottom line is he never really got the launch that Sooner Nation had hoped for. So one thing leads to another. Seth Luttrell's gone. Arnold hits the portal. Ben Arbuckle's here. Coming with him is John Mateer. And eventually Auburn grabs Jackson Arnold out of the portal. So now here we are in 2025, and he's leading the Tigers to a 3-0 start. He's playing well. I mean, it's fair to say that. He's playing well. He's running the ball. He's throwing with better decision-making. And there's no interceptions through 3 games so far. And so now you've got this rematch coming up on Saturday with Oklahoma and Auburn, a game that the Sooners stole last year on the road. But everyone's watching. And they're not talking about the Kip Lewis pick 6. They're talking about Jackson Arnold. College football fans in general, they're checking into this game. The media, not just in Norman, not just in Auburn, nationally, the insiders are there, and then these players themselves, they're going to talk about this. And what makes this feel extra potent is that both Jackson Arnold and the Oklahoma Sooners they've got their own personal narratives going on this game. And Brent Venables said that while Jackson is, quote, very talented, he didn't mention him by name. He said there will be an Auburn quarterback who's very talented. So you've got that, like, this is trying to make it, Brent, this is about Oklahoma versus Auburn, not about Jackson at all. But I mean, I would bet the dollars in my pocket right now, which is not a lot, but I would bet that there's no way Arnold's name is not coming up in that locker room. But Brent Venables emphasized, there's no pretending that Arnold's return to Norman won't stir emotion. The matchup becomes not just X's and O's. It's about, really for Oklahoma and Jackson Arnold, it's about maturity here. Does that storyline affect your preparation? And is the resilience there to kind of show that you can be focused on the game, not the storyline, when the lights become bright? So what does Oklahoma have to do? I think when you look at defensively, not just facing your former quarterback, facing your opponent, they've got to bring pressure. You've got to pressure. Scout him as any other quarterback on your opponent list. And what you're going to find out is you need to bring pressure. Oklahoma's defense has been stout. They've given up some offensive yards in spots, but what they haven't done is let a passing touchdown slip through their midst this season. And they forced a lot of punts, a bang load of punts. But if you're going to critique the defense, it's that there's no turnovers. That's what Venables said was disgusting. But the effort is there, the opportunity is there, but they haven't been able to get there. They haven't been able to capitalize on that. And now you're facing Jackson Arnold, who's improved, but, I mean, there's still some turnover scars, right? There's a chance. And pressure is the key. If Oklahoma can bring the pressure, if Oklahoma can disrupt his timing, if Oklahoma can force him to become uncomfortable, make some missed throws, make some misreads, or maybe, get him to the ground, hit him hard. Those are the types of things that bring turnovers and makes a difference. And you've got to do this. You've got to set, you can't wait till the third quarter. This is something that's got to be set right now. And you can't say, well, our Mason Thomas is coming back, so we'll get that done in the second. No, that's just ridiculous. We know that our Mason Thomas is not just one of the best pass rushers Oklahoma has. He's one of the best in the country. He's that guy who often forces the opposing quarterback into tight spots. But we've talked about depth many times in this episode. So Oklahoma's going to have to lean on Marvin Jones Jr. They're going to have to lean on Taylor Ween, PJ Adebawore. Danny Okoye is supposed to be good to go on Saturday. And if those guys show up physically, assignment sound, disciplined, what that does is it mitigates losing that Thomas, temporarily through the first 2 quarters of the game. But it does put more of a burden on the front. In Auburn's, the threat here is Auburn's running game. The threat here is the ability of even Jackson Arnold to run. What that means is for Oklahoma's defense, you've got to show gap discipline. You've got to show sure tackling. And the defensive ends, they've got to contain. They've got to contain those scrambles and try to force things up the middle. But the other thing I think you can't do here, I think you can't let the story become the story for either side. This is a big game for Jackson Arnold as well. So both sides have this looming over them, the albatross, if you will. But Brent Venables and Hugh Freeze, they're both trying everything in their power to deflect some of that personal focus. Freeze says that he's been talking to Arnold about keeping the focus on the team, not the emotional buildup to this game. Again, Brent Venables is going back saying this is Oklahoma versus Auburn, right? And that's smart on both sides. Because if either side goes back to, that narrative of hero returns versus old team, it overshadows the game plan. It overshadows any adjustments that may be made during the game. It overshadows situational execution. And that risk is going to be there throughout of distraction. So both teams needs to stay locked in. And the team that does that, the team that has that focus on blocking, tackling, snap counts, third downs, that's the team that's going to have the edge in this thing. So you can't let the story become the story. And I think naturally Oklahoma has an edge. I think when you look at what's working for Oklahoma, we've talked so much about depth. We've talked so much about culture here. And Oklahoma's roster has shown a mix of both veterans and promising young players contributing this season. And we talked about what Brent Venables said in Philadelphia, about they were good on all three levels. It's that depth that allows for rotations, that keeps pressure fresh. Guys that are able to step up and pass rushers, linebackers, secondary guys. So there's guys that this is going to be their opportunity to show that they're capable of being more than just a backup, and that's what you've got. I mean, when you look at that defensive line, for example, there are guys that come in and rotationally that could be starting in other places. You look in the secondary, you look across the linebacker unit. There are guys on this team, on this defense, making contributions. Same thing with this receiver unit. I think you could go, I know the running backs are kind of a hot topic, but I think even there is depth of guys that they're not the starters, but they want to prove that they have that talent. And when you look at the two quarterbacks involved in this game, I do think Oklahoma has the better of the two quarterbacks. And again, there were so many factors that played into Jackson Arnold's failure in 2024. But what we're seeing in 2025 is a sharp contrast to the offense we saw through the first 3 weeks of last year. And it's all because of John Mateer. He has settled in. He's got command from the pocket. He's got this blend of pass and rushing ability. And he will put a strain. Auburn's defense is going to be tested. And if Oklahoma can get ahead of the chains on early downs, man, that opens up so many more options. If Oklahoma can use the tempo that they showed last week in Philadelphia, it opens up the field for them because it doesn't give Auburn time to sub out. And then you tie that in with the guys around him. You tie that in with Jaren Kanak. You tie that in with Torrey Blaylock. You tie that in with this receiving core. And if everything is clicking for Oklahoma, they can force Auburn to play from behind, which, what does that do? That tends to expose quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks who may have a little bit of extra emotion hanging over their heads. And that's where Jackson Arnold finds himself. But he's going to try to stick with balance himself because that's what he's doing well this season. And he's shown it through his first 3 games. That this Auburn offense is not just one-dimensional. He runs. They as a team run. Their play action is effective. Their RPOs are effective. And he has shown improvements. Like this is a different Jackson Arnold than what we saw in Norman. The turnovers have not been there. Better reads have been there. And I think one of the benefits that he has that he didn't have in Norman last year is he's got an offensive line and running backs around him that can grind. And they're going to try to get physical with Oklahoma. They're going to try to force this defense to make mistakes. And there's that emotional lift that Arnold and Auburn needs. You got old teammates on the field. You got fans yelling things at you. You got media covering it from all angles. And that feeds into this energy. But energy can fade if execution slips. And that's where both sides have to be sharp. And you're really kind of just wanting to see, you're wanting to see who flinches first. So where does all this land, right? For me, I'll give you a score prediction on Thursday night, but I think Oklahoma wins this game. Not because of anything emotional that we've talked about, but I think they have the deeper roster. I think they have the momentum. I think there's a coaching edge here for Oklahoma, and certainly there's that home crowd. But I absolutely see this being a competitive first half. I see Auburn trying to establish rhythm. I see Jackson Arnold testing the edges. But I do expect, I think Oklahoma pulls away in the second half, especially with R. Mason Thomas coming back. So for a score prediction, I think you're going to have to wait till Thursday. Hopefully I won't mess around with the time and I'll actually get it in. But I think the key, I really do, I believe the key here is going to be an early turnover. I think defending the run for Oklahoma and making sure that John Mateer is not the guy who gives the ball away on Saturday. Because this thing can blow up pretty easy for Oklahoma if they allow big running plays, if they turn the ball over, if they commit penalties. It allows Auburn not just to stay close, but to have momentum and belief. But I don't see Oklahoma, what we've learned about them through the first 3 weeks of the season, I don't see that really being a factor. Because again, I think for Oklahoma, they've got the mindset that this Saturday, it's not just about this one game. It's about reclaiming the narrative that they lost a year ago. It's about showing that they made the right moves with the personnel changes. It's about showing their depth, even in the face of injuries and suspensions. That, this team is built deeper than all that. It's built deeper than storylines. I think they want to flash their culture. I think how you respond when someone who used to wear your jersey comes back and plays against you, I think that's a culture-defining moment. Like, do you let the moment or the game define who you are? And that's what they're going to show on Saturday. Do you play for your brand? Not the Jumpman logo, but your brand, that OU DNA. And that's what Brent Venables wants to see. That's what he wants. That's what Sooner Nation wants. And I think that's why he's emphasizing focus and process. That's why he's saying this is about Oklahoma and Auburn. He's reminding his team, guys, you got to play hard, you got to execute, and you don't live in this story. You live in this moment. So I think here's what we should expect on Saturday. I think with a game, I think you're going to see a game with emotional subtext. But what happens, what really matters is what's going to happen in the trenches when the ball is snapped. What's going to happen with the reads? I think you look at how Oklahoma's defense is allowed to put pressure on Jackson Arnold. I think you watch whether John Mateer and the Sooners offense can strike early like they have in every game this season. And can Oklahoma keep towing that line of being the more aggressive and the more physical and the more intimidating team on the field? Can they be mentally sharp and have that edge? That's where I believe this game is going to be won or lost, not just on heroics, but on really that hustle, that depth, that discipline, and execution. And all those things should favor Oklahoma, especially at home. If they do it, if they win convincingly against Auburn like they did against Michigan, there's that message you want to send. There it is right there. So we got more to come this week on the website, heartland-sports.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to our podcast. If you wanted to do us a solid and hit a subscribe button, give us a like, whatever, man, we really appreciate it. This has been the Sooner Nation podcast. Make sure you tune back in as we got more coming up on Thursday to talk about this game, and we'll give you our official score predictions then. Until that time, have a great rest of your week, and go Sooners.
I'm gonna be the man